Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Barry Kostrinsky. These are Artist Talks. We're at December 20th. Today we have Deanna Dawn Masselli, who's going to present on waste in the art world. At the same time, we have Maux Kelly modeling on 3 different screens. And I've said it before, well, there are some people who haven't been here in a while. The idea here is, can you draw, be attentive to your drawing, and listen at the same time? And then respond if you like. And I've always liked to challenge myself and artists to do that. And I'll tell you what I've learned is, if I'm drawing and I'm in the drawing zone, it's sort of like doodling when you're in school. It's not that you're not paying attention, you're actually paying hyper attention. And I find that if I'm drawing and I'm in my drawing zone, which what that means is I'm drawing consciously or hyper unconsciously, I'm able to actually listen deeper, even though my mind is focusing. And there's also this idea of, using as much of your mind as possible to sort of stimulate all of it and to reinforce. And I find it works. It takes some skill. So you're welcome to draw. Obviously, that's totally an option for anybody. It's just there for you. I will say next week is our last talk before the end of the year. And I've reached out to a few people, gotten a few ideas, and I've come up with this theme. The theme is the model talks. And we're going to have Mo be our model as usual. But you know how a model never talks? It's like we treat them like they're not people, like they're not there. And I always like to do the opposite of what we do, to point out sometimes we're doing the wrong thing. And so engaging the model and actually having the model both model and lead conversation. And I think that'll be fun for you, Mo. Naturally, I didn't ask her. I just told her that's what we're doing. But Mo and I have a good relationship with her. She just laughed and, of course, was game. And I think it's knowing your audience when you can do things like that. So that'll be next week. But at the same time, I want to ask any and all of you, as Michael Krasowitz said, it might be nice to have people read poetry that they like. Michael, if you'd like to read a poem for X number of minutes, go ahead. If somebody else wants to do anything they want to do, I sort of like this sort of non-planned chaos that is often quite organized, because we are of a similar mind, and we're individuals, but we're connected. And I think I see so many faces that I've seen over many talks, and at times, I say something before someone else does, and someone else says the same thing I'm going to say before I do. And that's the kind of connectedness I want to foster. And that's why I don't mute anybody. I want to let you mute yourself if you want to. In this world, we're often muted more than enough. I want to say thank you. I've received a contribution. I want to keep it anonymous. And also the model has received a very nice contribution. Mo does this for free. If anybody would like to contribute to her for the modeling that she's been doing, maybe the last 8 sessions or so, if you'd like to go ahead, you can always reach out to me. I'll send you her information. And likewise, if you'd like to contribute for what I've done, of course, I never say no to money, no matter what I have to do. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Deanna Dawn Masselli, and she's going to lead us in a discussion that, of course, you're all welcome to jump in. And that's, again, that sort of planned chaos to sort of respond to ideas, to develop ideas, to go deeper and in different sort of branches of the conversation as you like, as you feel comfortable with. So again, Deanna, thank you for your time, for organizing this. Deanna is a part. I met her through a collage group that we've been in together through Jill Gerwitz. And it's an example, as David Gregory and I were talking about earlier, how artists, can connect other artists. And connection, I think, is maybe one of the highest principles of not only being human, but being alive. I'm not sure if rocks connect to other rocks, and I don't want to diss any rocks, but animate forms, I think all of them, plants, humans, any animal, fish, I think connectedness is something that is ever present and ever hidden. And so that's the idea here. Well, thank you all for your time. And Deanna, thank you. Share screen as you like and give us a little intro. Anything you like, Deanna.
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate that. And next Tuesday with Mo leading sounds incredible. I can't wait to see it or to be a part of it. Yeah, so I just thought it was a really interesting idea to start talking about or to open a conversation up about waste in the art world. I don't know about you guys, but Instagram, this sort of like necessary evil as you're scrolling through, I'm sometimes pulled into those videos that are constantly, screaming to get our attention. And there's a few in particular that keep popping up for whatever reason, the same, type of art. And I've seen it a few times and I look at it, it's heavy paints and a lot of reused items, not reused items, but items that, are used. For example, one roll of almost a toilet paper. No, not toilet paper, paper towels being used, an entire roll to like make marks on a page or a canvas that's already saturated with paints. And just seeing these constantly come through my feed, of course, I just started thinking more about it. And I reached out to Barry and I said, this would be a great idea for a talk one night. And immediately Barry was like, okay, you're on. I was like, I didn't mean me, but here I am and I'm glad to be here. So, as Barry said, like not to diss rocks, not dissing any medium or any artist or any style of art. It's just a conversation about what we can maybe do as artists and, bringing attention to materials or processes or anything that, may contribute to, toxicity anywhere, our bodies, the environment. So that's kind of the inspiration behind the talk. And so I'm going to get started with the share screen so you can see where we're going to start. We'll do a little bit of history. All right, I think we've started.
We have.
Just make sure you can hear me okay, and you can see my screen. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you.
Great, thanks, Barry. So yes, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the sort of origination of starting out of trash art. I think you're all familiar with a person named Marcel Duchamp, aka our mutt, as you see here. One of the first quote trash artists using this fountain, as he named it, as a piece of found art, or also known as trash art. And I would say that really found items have been used in art for many, many, many centuries. However, this was the time of the age where it was sort of coined as trash art. So it's sort of the beginning of that movement, giving it a title. So that's kind of where it originated in terms of titling and a movement. And it started with, of course, the Dadaists and the Surrealists, and kind of was adapted by Andre Breton, who you see here did a object poem, and Miro, little object sculpture there. And of course, we have to mention Hannah Hawk with her materials, with collage artists. With the collage artists have a long history of using found items and mixed materials, like mixed materials. And anybody wants to join in and, has something to contribute while we're talking and while I'm talking, feel free. I can't see you, but just kind of chime in.
I will just say.
So is this a term?
Sorry.
So is this a?
Go ahead. Sorry.
So is this a term that you've come up with yourself? Trash art?
Oh no, this was what it was called. They called it trash art back in the time. Back in like the 1917, I think this was created. They did coin it trash art, and it's been, that terminology has been used for since then.
Not
Yes.
like
No.
Dada?
Dada
It
is
included
actually
Dada or surrealism or whatever.
separate from those, yes, as a movement itself, trash art.
And also today, it's commonly known as ready-mades, Dada being a larger movement that, happened in several European countries. Surrealism, I want to say a little bit after Dada, being like 1970, 1940. Surrealism, Andre Breton, probably like 1930. He sort of coalesced as a group, a global group. But yes, using recycled materials is one way to put it, or what are traditionally non-art items, materials.
Yeah, I'm just sort of showing the lineage of the found art and trash art sort of, trajectory in history. We're going to move right along to environmental and how this, evolves into waste, or, it still exists today, trash art kind of separate from environmental art to a degree. But for example, we'll move into the 70s with Agnes Dennis, who did Wheatfield. This was in, 1968, I believe. This is downtown New York. And she was one of the first environmental female artists. She also created what you're seeing here. It's called Rice Tree Burial. It was the first site-specific performance art. This was her, what she called, it was an art event declaring her sort of commitment to environment and human concerns. She planted rice, she wrote and buried haikus in the ground, and she even chained up trees. The chain sort of represented the, interference of art and nature. So, this is sort of evolving into the environmental, it has evolved into the environmental artists. And these are the first people that were groundbreaking into getting us where we are now. This is another piece of hers. This is actually in Long Island City. It's called The Living Pyramid and was done in 2015. She used a lot of triangles in her work. And another one of that era is Niles Udo, I think. Udo, yes. This is called Nest from 1978. He did a lot of pieces like this, marrying nature and the human form. There's another piece later on in the presentation for the slides. And then, of course, jumping a little further ahead, we've got Banksy, street art. This piece here was, I believe, in London, Wales, boy licking snow next to dumpster. He's well known for his commentary on pollution and politics. As you can see here, I wanted to include this slide so you could or this image so you could see the barricade around it with people looking on and taking the photos, and seeing the close-up of initially thinking it's this beautiful image of a child eating snow next to this dumpster that's actually ash. Another take on environment, another piece of Banksy. This one is Girl Under Umbrella. Several names for these sometimes. This one is from London, 2013. And then of course, Banksy's famous for his rats commentary, or his representation of rats and toxic waste. And some other artists that I found that I really was drawn to more recent. This is Subodh Gupta. He does steel and in nature. This is a steel sculpture from 2013. This is Nature Morte. But I thought it would be interesting, that's him there. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about, how we're transforming waste, or we're using waste, or we're bringing attention to waste or toxicity in the environment. Also known now as earth artists and land artists. these are some of the people that are, you know, really standing out or have stood out in the past. And also including in this toxic elements that we use in our art. You know, for example, cadmium red is toxic, or used to be. Here's an example of some liquid paints. And we've got resin, which everybody knows is highly toxic. We still use it. I mean, what else do we have, right? I mean,
Right. And even the paint thinners, I went, you know, into the hardware store, which is obviously a major source for artists as art materials. And, you know, I wanted the alternative to turpentine and ended up with mineral spirits or something. And they were telling me at the hardware store, that stuff's really toxic. I don't know if there is a solution for thinning your oil paints. I mean, linseed oil, yes, but cleaning your brushes and, you know, it is an issue. And certainly, you know, being a oil painter, you know, do you have to wear gloves? If you don't wear gloves, you know, you get that cadmium red in the cuticle area. That's not a good feeling. You know, artists are often dismissive of the effect of the material that materials have on themselves, because they're looking to make art. And, you know, it's beautiful as a priority, but it could also be punishingly painful to your body. And let's not forget, ceramics is something I love, a great material. You know, clay goes airborne very quickly, little bits of dust. It's so light, and you breathe that in. It is terrible for your lungs. So let alone when you're firing a kiln. And, you know, I know an artist who worked without a flue and a chimney out of his kiln. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of toxicity in materials and in artists sort of ignoring things. And then sometimes you'll see an artist, they're in like a hazmat suit when they're working. And
well, that's another aspect or issue that, you know, is a question that I feel is worthy of discussion. At what point is the process of making an environmental piece worth the payout, what you're sacrificing in terms of, you know, materials that are being used and processes that are still toxic?
It of course reminds me of Eva Hess pieces, and Eva Hess with her getting cancer from the materials. So stuff is definitely toxic.
Absolutely. And it's not funny, but at the same time, it's kind of important. I did read a little piece about how there were people actually killed by being crushed by an Alexander Calder installation at one point. It's not funny, but I think it's an interesting aspect.
if you see the great movie, I think it's J.W. Turner, maybe J.M. Turner, a great film worth seeing. In it, you see Turner, you know, mixing the oil paints in his hand. And you know, you don't necessarily know if that's the way it happened, but sometimes I feel like in these films, they've done their research, and the idea of using your hand to mix your oil paints. Audrey Anastasi points out mineral spirits are way worse than turpentines, and odorless just means you are less aware of it. You can clean brushes with any vegetable oil, and I love laundry soap cakes from the 99-cent store to wash after. So thanks, Audrey, for pointing that out. Maybe I will try that.
Yeah, even something that we think is so, you know, I don't use glitter. I used to in my collages, but I don't anymore. Many of them are microplastics. So that's a big factor that I learned about while researching. So I bring
I'm
that
sorry,
up.
what did you say you use, Deanna?
This is an example of glitter. I don't use it
Oh.
I used to, once in a while I've used it in collages in the past, but you know, I do see mixed media artists, like, you know, some of them use a lot of heavy glitter and stuff like that. And it's a microplastic.
Mm,
I did not know that. Another area that I learned about is the art fairs. Art fairs create a huge amount of waste. This example here is this was created, this installation, by leftover waste from an art fair. This you see here, I'm looking for the artist's name, Bobby Neal. It's called When the Smoke Clears, the Fair FAIR Housing Project.
And of course, you have to take into consideration for these art fairs, how's everything getting there? It's being brought in trucks, whether they're burning diesel or gasoline, you know, or even if they're driving in electric cars, where's the source of that electricity coming from? It might be a coal burning plant that supplies it, you know, and also there's a lot of work to put up an art fair and then it's taken down. I mean, imagine all the work going in to build a house and then in 1 week you take it down.
Exactly. And then same with all the art installations, you know, even the environmental ones that aren't really part of the ecosystem. At some point, they're taken down, and what is done with those materials? Maybe they might move to another place or another gallery, but sometimes they don't. Let's see. I need to go back to this, for example. This is funny. This was part of a art fair in Italy, and it was an avant-garde art installation, and that accidentally literally got cleaned up and thrown away. They thought it was trash, so it was thrown away, the whole installation. Little fun side kind of comment on trash and art.
even the pieces against the wall there, they threw it all away.
They threw it all away.
Oh, God. Okay.
I just thought that was kind of funny.
Well,
So yeah,
Damien Hirst went ahead and he was doing a thing where I'm maybe getting part of this wrong, but he was, I think if you bought the NFT, he would then burn the work of art kind of thing. So, you know, obviously a conceptual play. Damien Hirst is no dummy. He's quite a smart guy, but then again, Rembrandt would not be burning his drawings. And it sort of speaks to, you know, Damien Hirst. It was pretty much, it wasn't dot paintings, but it was something like the dot paintings. And so, you know, it begs a lot of questions like, is your work of value? Can you just burn it? Are you, you know, or, you know, what's, when you then burn it, have you created or just made waste, just destroyed materials? And of course, you know, Damien Hirst plays in that conceptual field.
Yeah, I think he burned several of his like old sketches and things like that, a bunch of them.
Okay.
But there is a thing, you know, art that is burnt or it's temporary is photographed, and then the photograph becomes the art. Same sort of thing. I know Bruce McLean that was his thought, because he would do things that weren't really permanent, but the photography, the pictures became the art. And he would use a lot of trash, found stuff, lean it against the wall, you know, kooky stuff like that. Anyway.
Yeah, it does speak to ephemera. It does speak to sort of the passing nature of objects. No question about that. Yeah.
yeah, you know, and I mean, we're all artists and we all want to, you know, create. So we're going to use the products that we use, but maybe it just helps to possibly be a little bit more mindful about it. And, you know, I'm a collage artist, and I say this and I'm guilty of it too. I had to have some image transparencies to use in a piece and I ordered them and I've used 2 so far and I've not used, it comes in a packet of like 20 or 30. I had to have these, I've used 2 and that's it. Now they're sitting in a drawer. So I had thought about that a little bit and I thought, well, for certain pieces that I do, I like to do sort of, melding photos together. And now we've got such great technology that I thought, let me try and visualize this piece or realize this piece that I want to do just by doing some editing with my, phone and see how it's going to turn out. And I loved the way it turned out. And I thought, okay, now I really want to see if I can build it with my hands. At the same time, creating it as a sort of draft digitally helped me realize what I wanted to do, but it also saved me from maybe wasting a lot of drafts or a lot of tests and things like that. So, it makes you think about technology and, technology's role in this waste reduction as well. And, then you wonder, well, okay, are maybe digital artists kind of the environmentalists in the art world and of the future that we don't realize it yet?
As I sit here, I'm drawing on paper. Paper comes from trees that were, cut down. I think we've learned we're sort of responsible for everything. You don't get a buy just because you don't know, oh, that happened to get that for you. So I think there is a responsibility we have. On the other hand, you got to ask, what are the alternatives? And so, I think, it's sort of a wishy-washy answer. I think we sort of, I am going to use paper. But maybe I just have to be conscious that this paper, it really, to me, a tree, an animal, nature, plants, there's no real difference except what we define. So we really are killing something, when we draw on paper.
Right. I also just kind of wanted to bring up in terms of the environmental aspect, I feel like we can't really talk about that without this new, not even new, but bringing newer awareness to environmental racism as well, in terms of a lot of the environmental issues that are created in, Black and brown neighborhoods. This is an artist, let me get her name for you. She's a Floridian, which kind of drew me to her after living in Florida for a little while. And she does mixed media, she does photography, she does sculpture with a focus on environmental issues, but specifically more environmental racism. Here's some of her photography. And that's one of her sculptures. You can see those are alligators down there.
What is her name?
I'm getting
know?
that for you right now.
I was just going to jump in. I know Babs likes that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. And I'm in Florida these days, so I'm just sort of curious who
Oh,
it
cool.
is.
Whereabouts in Florida?
I'm in St. Pete.
Oh, I love St. Pete.
Yeah, near Tampa.
Allison Janae Hamilton.
Yeah.
A lot of her work comes from folklore, inspired by folklore and nature and toxic environments, specifically, culturally racist, racism, combating environmental racism, bringing awareness to it.
I like
So as
that
you can
piece.
see, there's so many different levels to this, right? I didn't know that large pieces of metal were toxic. So all these sculptors working in, I knew it could be toxic to a degree, but all these sculptors using large metal sculptures, that's that can be toxic as well.
Yeah, you find out so many things can be, especially if they're shedding debris. Like I use rusted steel frames for my stain painting pieces, and I make work that's about the environment, but in just handling the stuff and being around it, to be conscious of that. Just, I mean, no matter how hard you try, there's always some material that seems to have some toxic quality to it.
Yeah, there's not very many ways around it, I don't think, but you know, I read something about, I don't know if anybody's tried them. They're called liquid gloves that supposedly you wash off. I have not tried them. That might be, you know, I do use plastic gloves sometimes, but they're biodegradable, of course.
Well, it's like the liquid Band-Aid stuff. I guess it's the same kind of premise.
Right. And
Mention, right?
yeah, it's not also just the particles that kind of, you know, shave off when you're, you know, sanding something or whatever. It's also the particles that just break down over time,
Right.
that get into the atmosphere. So
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say. It's like the rust
Yeah.
itself that's floating. And I wear obviously masks and gloves when I'm wire brushing it to then seal it. But even after it's sealed, sometimes there still seems to be a bit of debris. But most of that, but I'm using obviously a toxic chemical, you know, toxic coating to seal it.
Right.
And yet I'm making this work that's making a comment on the environment. Well, I'm trying to be, you know, the latest work is more mindful, but still all of it. It's impossible.
And again, it's not like, you know, pointing out any specific way or material that a person's working. It's just really creating a conversation about, you know, what can we do, you know? For instance, those recyclable cloths I've heard are pretty good with painting, but I'm not sure. I haven't used them enough or painted enough to know. And of course, you know, I recycle a lot of like products that I might use as like, you know, containers and art containers, art supplies, things like that. And I love YouTube for that stuff. If you want to know how to like recycle or upcycle any item in your home, you just go to YouTube and somebody's done it. Does anyone else want to say anything or have anything that they want to mention? No pressure, of course.
I do want to point out as an aside, you know, Mo is on 3 different screens, you know, and this is all her doing. And as well, you know, it's quite a challenge when you're screen sharing and the model we're drawing is on like 1 inch by 2 inch. And I definitely like that challenge. You know, I was friends with Anthony Hayden Guest, and I once invited him to drawing that I used to do at a spot. And he's quite a cartoonist, which I really respect because you have to summarize the figure in a few lines. And he said a great line to me. He goes, "Barry, I can't draw." And that's why I didn't want to come. And I think he was quite wrong. He actually can draw. So when you can reduce, and somehow if you look at some of the great, you know, drawings by Michelangelo, there's not that many marks sometimes there. And you get, you know, the form, you get the ripples of the muscles. And I've seen an artist at our life drawing group, a little less known than Michelangelo, who I would say, "You draw like Michelangelo." And I once said to her, "You know, show me how you do this." And she took a smudge stick and she made a little mark with charcoal and she smudged it. And it's like, oh my God, it was like she got a muscle and a rounded form, an oval form. You know, I know it's aside from what we're discussing, but I do like mixing back and forth between the drawing skill and the sort of discussion, you know, on using materials. Peg Riley asked, are water mixable oil paints less toxic? I would imagine so. But there is something to old fashioned oil paints that has a thickness and a richness that, out of ignorance, I don't want to give up. So it may be far less toxic, but there's something to oil paints that's quite beautiful.
Well, I'll wrap up the visual portion by sharing just a couple extra trash artists proper that I found. This here is Jane Perkins. She does portraits, as you can see, with found trash items. I see a lot of buttons in there. See a lot of what looks like kids' toys. There's a racket. You see the racket there? Does anybody see other things they can identify? Oh, there's Shrek. There's Shrek up at the top. I see some little tiny brushes in there. Whoop. That's pretty fun. This is all trash.
One of those troll dolls too.
Ooh, this is fun. This here is a light sculpture by David Edgar, made from a recycled, I think looks to me like a laundry detergent, I would say. It's called Green Fiesta Jellyfish.
That's a great piece. That's a great piece. I do have a solution to our problem of creating waste. And it's quite simple and it's quite drastic. And the idea is you make it so you can't throw anything away. And so I once heard that in Japan, and I'm sure it's not true of big cities, but in a lot of places, it's incredibly clean. And the reason is there are no garbage cans. They're sort of in the public space, or at least that's what I heard. And the idea there is that, like in hiking, you bring it in, you carry it out. But my idea is a little more extreme. When you buy a product, you own the container for life. And if you made that a rule, you'd be surprised how quickly manufacturers would use objects to hold their products that were biodegradable. And another industry would spring up where people would use the leftover Coke cans and build chairs out of them and things. And we get very creative. And I put the onus, it sounds like it would fall on the individual, but very quickly individuals would not buy certain objects that they weren't allowed to throw away the housing it came in. And if you were forced to live with it, there would be solutions so that it had a function, that it biodegraded, that it turned into a chair. And imagine, it's drastic, but I think it's a solution. And it would throw back. Imagine manufacturers saying, our products, our containers won't cause you any problems when you're done, because no one's taking ownership of the fact that plastic top in this image, where does it go? What does it take, 20,000 years to decay? We just pile up landfills. Do we just go ahead and repurpose it into a work of art? No offense to this work of art, but what happens to that when it's not?
Well, and even then it decays, but it's plastic. So it really just breaks down into microplastic.
Yeah, the
Never goes
plastics never go away. Yeah, that's exactly right. Plastic never goes away. The microplastic is even more of an issue in the oceans and such.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring up the glitter. It was a great example of the microplastics.
Microplastic, yeah. But I think Barry's idea is sort of interesting though, because regardless, you still got the product, and even if you're using it, okay, so then you die and there's the product. It was a chair at one point, then what happens to it? Or it was if it was turned into some kind of functional object. And I'm trying to do more of that with that, the shredded I've been making these shredded cast paper bricks that are now part of my installation. And they're paper, so they'll eventually disintegrate, but that's okay. And they started out as paper. The plastic is the biggest issue. And I do have to say, this is I don't call this stuff recycled. This is upcycled. You know, you're taking
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
still exists, because you're not recycling it for any other real purpose. You're like you said, creating a piece of art. I don't know what, you know,
Yeah, and
the
even
problem
just-
of plastic is huge.
yeah. I mean, even just something as the name, you know, like for example, you know, artist, this guy specifically identifies as a trash artist, where other people identify as upcycling or, you know, DIY or whatever, you know, just in terms of language. So that's what another area that's interesting to me, the language aspect of it too.
Yeah,
Found object artist, you know, or you're a
right.
found object artist, but you're not necessarily a trash artist.
Hmm.
Like, are the
Well, I think
world's
Barry's idea is very interesting.
I think it's a great idea, Barry, and if someone
Yeah.
can figure out how to monetize that,
Yeah,
there you go.
absolutely.
But like I remember, I think I went to the Tenement Museum or something, and they were talking about if people wanted beer, they would go to the bar and they would bring a bucket and they would get served beer and they would bring it back home. And that's how it was, like, you know, way back when, until they invented bottles and cans and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna just show you my last image here, and then I'll come back to video. Just one of my favorite images that I found through this whole investigation, I'll call it, is this is going back to the Maux Kelly artist with his marrying nature and the human form, which is one of my favorite things to do. I love marrying just a simple concept in nature is so impactful. And that's it. I'm going to come back and we could talk a little more.
Okay, I'll stop. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you.
Let's open it up for any thoughts at all, you know, related to what we discussed, and you know, anything that sparks an idea. Obviously, solutions are hard to come by. You know, we're in a complicated society. If you went back to 17th century, you know, in the simpler times, life was much harder, but there were a lot less problems posed and created. And, you know, I guess I could walk to Trader Joe's to get my things, but, you know, I drive. And so there's a lot that goes with it. I will say there's little solutions happening. People carry their own bags, so brown paper bags, and, you know, getting that. Someone once told me in Germany, it's normal for people to go with the sack, so they get some of the materials that they're buying, some of the produce and other objects, and it's not all packaged. But there's that other trend where, you know, when you have kids, you don't buy a big box of something, you buy like 40 containers that are all small, so you can just throw it in the lunchbox, and it's very easy. You don't have to divvy it up. And by the way, if you divvy it up, are you putting it in plastic bags? It seems like sometimes the solutions are not the best. I got news for you. If somehow the solutions had to be solved by billion-dollar companies, you'd see a million solutions happening all over the place, and they would be promoting them. And you know, yeah.
I went to Italy not that long ago, and I noticed how they did their recycling. So we have like paper, and then we have everything else like plastic bottles, glass bottles, blah, blah, blah. But they had that, but then they got more specific. So for instance, if you ate something like a York peppermint patty, you know, how they're wrapped in that kind of like plasticky wrapper. Anything like that was in a different container. So those kind of wrappings were a special thing. And like, so they had 4 or 5 ways to recycle. And when you brought your trash down, you were expected to peel it apart and put it in those separate receptacles.
So sort of further segmentation and dealing with it. But understand also the way we deal with it now, there's a lot of energy that goes into recycling the materials, energy that's coming from coal burning power plants. It is a tricky loop to try and get out of.
Yeah, yeah.
I have been reading lately that for years, only about 10 or 20% gets recycled.
Mhm.
That's true. Yeah.
And that is of the materials that we've already washed and put into the proper bins. That's not 10 or 20% of all materials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you
one of
know-
the things that you go to the grocery every time and you're thinking, okay, you bring your bags, you do your best, and you don't reuse it. And then every item you buy is in some kind of plastic container. You buy a bottle of ketchup, you buy a bottle of salad dressing, you buy a bottle of mustard. But they stopped using glass and they started using everything's plastic. And so it's almost, I can't believe our recycling bin, how much gets filled so quickly every week. And you realize all these items, and it drives you crazy. Even I've gone to picking, pieces of produce because I can't stand buying the bag, because you're buying the bag that it's a plastic bag that they're using. Then you're buying these like grape tomatoes or something. Everything's in plastic, everything.
Mhm.
Drives you insane. It's impossible to do anything about it.
Well, that's a good point. It is impossible to do anything about it as consumers. And what I take issue with is how big business is. They're the ones that have created the mess. They're the ones still contributing the most to the mess, but all of the fix and all of the anxiety over it is falling to the consumers, and the raised prices for what we have to, substitute or do, all of the whole chaos of it. And it's like, well, when do we say to a big company like blah, 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 you know what? The environment is suffering. You're not allowed to dump an entire football field of plastic every day into a landfill until you come up with a solution. There are solutions. They're not using them. Like I see all the time. I ordered it recently. Soap that comes in like it's not a bottle anymore. It's a packet.
The pods.
It's the pods. Yes, everything.
They're not even pods, they're sheets.
Yeah, they're sheets.
It's a sheet that just disintegrates. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even like soap that used to come in a bottle, it comes in like a bag now. You can get stuff like that, but it's very limited, and it doesn't make sense to me why these big companies can't switch over very easily and very quickly to these other containers.
But they're
The
not
consumer
cost-
suffers.
It's costs. It's all about costs. And the
But we'll
plastic
pay more
industry.
for it.
Yeah, but the
Here's a-
plastic industry rules. I mean, the
Here's a
plastic
look-
industry would die,
No,
Well,
how
the
do you make
Here's
it
a-
die? Hmm?
I'm going to interrupt this conversation.
the way they do it, so I had a metalworking company.
I think
Wait.
Lawrence wanted to say
Oh,
something.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Sorry,
Oh.
Barry.
I was going to interrupt this conversation. I'm going to give the good news and the bad news. The bad news first. When I was a little boy, you bought a bottle of Coca-Cola. It was about a nickel or a dime, and the deposit was a nickel. Here we are, 65 years, 70 years later, and it's still a nickel. And it doesn't cover everything. And why would that be? Why would it be that something so basic to this conversation, which is a huge conversation, which is a conversation that everybody should be having. Why would it be that they keep it that way? Could it be racism? Because after all, who makes their living off collecting nickel bottles? It's the lowest class, the lowest level, of the lowest caste of people that we have. I think that that is probably a big, the convenience for us is the nickel thing. Oh, just would mean more people would be able to get more nickels if they were able to apply them to other items too. And by the way, maybe inflation should be involved in that calculation of whether it should be a nickel or not. The good news is that we as artists, we think about these things. We think about everything. And I think that art is perhaps one of the very best, or is the best if you count spoken art and count written art and reportage, counting that as art, and is the most important thing that we do. And we as artists probably should get at least a little bit of a pass on being concerned about these things to the point where they stop us in our tracks, which I think is what we've sort of just done to ourselves in this conversation. And so the good news is we don't have to pay attention to that. We are paying attention to that. We need to communicate that. And some of this work you're showing, and I love the story about the piece that was thrown away because they thought it was garbage.
When I go to the, Lawrence, can I jump in?
Sure.
When I go to the grocery store, I bring my own plastic bags. And then like when I buy apples or broccoli or whatever, I put it in the plastic bag and then I wash it out when I'm done with it. And I haven't gotten any of those plastic bags that they give you for free in like, I can't remember when.
Yeah.
So there's like a little thing that,
Yeah,
you
I actually
try.
I was asked to do a piece. This is a long story. I'm not going to tell it, but I was asked to do a piece on the subject of plastic bags versus reusable bags, and it turns out reusable bags don't get reused enough to compensate for the amount of material that needs to go into them to make them strong enough to use more than once.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, the reason I pointed out the fact that you can do those things, and it makes you feel at least like you're contributing something, but when you walk down the aisle, all the packaged items, everything's packaged, even when because it's bulk selling, that's where they make their money most of the time, is in that bulk kind of selling in the grocery store. And I'm giving for example a group of zucchinis or a bag of string beans. You can bring this other bag, but you're like, it's you're one little drop in the ocean. And it's I mean, it's interesting, Lawrence, what you said about they've done studies on like what you're actually combating. What can you achieve? The only thing you can achieve is to somehow make people aware of it and then go after the companies. Until somehow the companies change, it's very difficult as an individual to make that kind of significant change. Now, I don't have any, I mean, I'm making work that talks about this because I just want to make people aware. But solutions, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's a seismic shift that would need to happen because we've grown into this. And let's not forget, I mean, all those loaves of bread in their individual plastic bags coming from the factory, it does have an advantage. I mean, any contamination would have had to have occurred at the factory. It couldn't have occurred in transport or in putting it on the shelf.
Yeah.
Or somebody coughing on it. while it's on the shelf.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing is to work more and more on these biodegradable, and there are people that are working on that and have made discoveries, and these kinds of bags that are biodegradable. They don't,
Okay.
they're made out of materials. That's the answer. It's not the answer of like trying to, you know, the packaging is to me has always been the thing. You know, open up your cupboards. It's like you look at every freaking item with the packaging. And I'm not just talking produce, I'm talking everything. A package of chicken, anything. And then they're using that cellophane that turns into that microplastic. And somebody, I think it was Barry, was saying something about like when you pack the art to ship it, when you know, those kind of things too. Like I save all my packing material. And if I'm not using it to ship something, but then I'm using it to ship
Awesome.
to
I'm here.
a gallery, I don't get it back. They throw it away.
We're doomed.
Mhm.
There's great discussion, you guys, but doctors don't care. And all they use is plastic all day long.
Yeah,
I am covered in plastic. I make so much plastic trash every week. It's a diabetic and trash hand in hand.
wow.
Medical device, you know, they put on a pair of gloves, they throw it out, put on a pair of gloves. They don't have this discussion.
Yeah,
They're making much less trash than doctors are.
Well, and also during the pandemic, if you noticed, a lot of restaurants went to throwaway. They didn't want to wash the plates. And I was aware of this. I went to a Chinese restaurant and they didn't give us food on ceramic plates anymore. It was like 10 different containers holding different things. And so, you know, and I said to my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife, what's going on here? We just throwing out concern and care for the environment now because we're focused on COVID, and that happens quite a lot. I would say, Babs, you're right. We got to throw the onus on the manufacturers. And I was going to say earlier, when I had a manufacturing company, you know, the move was to go and not use toxic chemicals. And then all of a sudden I got something I bought, a trichloroethane. We're talking real toxic stuff. But, you know, I inherited the company and the trends of how I bought things. And then when I got like a bill that was like an extra $400 for this chemical, I very quickly spoke to Enequist, my chemical company, and they gave me a recommendation for another product that worked. And the switch happened. The point is, you throw a tax on something and you make a business aware that there's a cost associated with a product, they're going to find a solution. And pollution rights, that was a thing. All of a sudden it became a traded commodity where, you know, you got X number of pollution rights, and if you polluted, it sounds ridiculous, you had to buy them from other people. It sounds nuts, but if you bring economic issues in, even as crazy as forcing someone to buy and pay for the ability to pollute more, they're going to find ways not to. So they don't have that extra expense. And I think we have to make manufacturers responsible for the whole object. After all, if they made a piece of broccoli that gave us cancer, let's say, you know, like Monsanto with their products Roundup, they're responsible for that product, and they multi-billion-dollar lawsuits and settlements. Well, why don't we look at the containers as well? Because we're forced to buy that. And yes, I have a friend who saves every bit of aluminum foil, every bit of plastic, you know, and all of that. And I hate to say it, the efforts of the one, as much as we think, well, if 7 billion people did it, it would work. 7 billion people aren't doing it. The efforts of the one are minimal. I noticed, Babs, too. I can't believe the amount of garbage that we think are recyclables comes out of my kitchen. I cannot believe it. It is amazing. And I think that's where we have to start. And I don't know.
Well,
What's
I
that?
just want to take it to one other thing with the holding the manufacturers. One of the reasons I had brought up the political a while back, and you know, this thinking that a lot of people don't, you know, you're living in New York, you don't have to worry about really politics or who you're voting for. And look, New York State was the one that's partially responsible for Congress flipping to the Republicans, and who are not interested really in any of these things. Unfortunately, they are driven by the money that that funds them, and the money that funds them are these vast companies that don't want to make these kinds of changes. And so that's the frustrating part. It's like people don't seem to understand that the voting for these people that think like we think, and to try to hold them accountable, that's the kind of things that are going to make a difference. Yes, use your bags, do these things, but there has to be other ways. And how do you hold these people, the people that can really change things, like you're saying, a tax or whatever the things that you're talking about? But there are bigger ways, that there are laws that need to be put into place that stops them from doing the things they're doing, which means we have to get the people in place that will make those laws. Anyway, I can't stay on much longer, but this has been fun.
I'm gonna wrap it up. We've sort of hit our 1 hour time. I want to thank you, Deanna, again. Thank you for that, sort of provoking the conversation. And yes, we naturally go away from art very quickly. And thank all of you. Next week, just as the model, didn't it sound funny when Mo spoke? We're just not used to the model speech. It's so next week, it's all Mo. Mo, we're gonna have you model, do your thing, and Mo's gonna run with the flow.
Print out writing or something.
You're gonna do anything you like. We'll be drawing you. We'll have the model full screen, and anybody else who wants to share any content, read a poem, anything you want to do, let's have it all happen haphazardly. That's sort of a nice way to do it. Thanks everybody for coming. I will say one thing. I actually, I draw while this goes on. I do a composite drawing. I actually sold one of those drawings. Sort of a
Very cool.
Yeah, sort of a beautiful full circle that I'm proud of. And the other thing I'll say is, if you want something to happen, sometimes you got to say it. There's a thing in the Bible, and I'm going to paraphrase it wrong, and the word created. There's this concept that saying things create things. And so if you want to sell your art, if you want to get exhibits, I'm getting exhibits. My art is selling. Make these positive manifestations. Never say, oh, you're a pain in my ass. You'll end up with rectal cancer. The body is listening. The universe is listening. There's a connectedness that is very deep. So beware of what you say and just put it out there. Obviously, it then takes all the work, the doing the art, the marketing the art, but somehow it becomes a song that's synchronized together. Thank you all for coming. Spread the word. Next week's celebration too, and a joy. Drinks are welcome. And if you'd like to contribute to Mo, who is on 3 screens, I know every time I draw and look up, I'm like, which screen was I drawing? Because my brain is like, it just can't keep track. But I like that. I sort of
Barry, I just need to know, where is your accent from?
I had a factory in the South Bronx, so it's that sort of Jewish, accent.
Drawing. I can't even say it the way you say it. I want to know where did you grow up with the word drawing?
I grew up in Westchester County, but
Okay.
I spent enough time in a factory in the South Bronx that I sort of half Latinized my accent. And I once had an artist say, when I was talking about art, she was like, I love the way you talk about art with that accent, because it's so yes.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. I'm drawing over here, man. I'm drawing. It's like
Drawing.
I'm walking here, man. I'm walking.
You're talking to me.
That's a great pose that Mo is in right now. In case anybody's getting any last minute drawings in.
So thank you, Mo. And Mo, of
Thank
course, if
you.
anybody wants to contribute, again, thank you to those that did. It goes a long way. And I hope all of you sell your art, and I hope all of you get shows. See you all next week. Spread the
Thank you
word.
so
Thank
much,
you.
everybody. Thank you. Good
Bye.
night. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll stay here till